So bagpipes actually aren't from Scotland, but we'll get into that in a second. From the lowlands of a golf course all the way up to Boston, I've been playing bagpipes consistently for 6 years now. Bagpipes have been a huge part of Scottish culture for centuries, even with their very strange and complex history. So today's bagpipes have a very fascinating history, an intimidating yet simple design, but with a pretty finicky tuning system. So I'd like to direct your attention now to Samaria. So according to the Iowa State University Department of Music and Theater, historians have agreed that bagpipes originated from Samaria and eventually made their way to Scotland through Celtic migrations through Persia, India, Greece, and Rome. And these very early bagpipes, unlike the ones we have today, they only had one drone that were connected to the pipe and the same chanter that we see today. These are depicted more in medieval statues, but with very little preserved writings about them, so we don't have a ton of information on the old bagpipes. And because they were made of organic materials, they really did not stay around that long. So the second type of bagpipe that were created were the ones that had two drones. Still didn't have the third one yet, but these two drone bagpipes were called the shepherd style and were used in more for sheep herders and in an agricultural style. So the third kind that we have today, which is right there, is the three drone bagpipe, which is the Highland bagpipe. So traditionally, the bag on these were, people usually think that they were made out of sheep stomachs, but they were actually out of the bladder. So the people of the old days would use essentially whatever animal they could get their hands on to make this instrument. They would use cows, goats, sheep, and even dogs. And eventually they started to progress their technology a little bit and would take two hides and stitch them together to make the bag. So for the drones, according to the book The Highland Bagpipe, local woods were used to make early pipes in holly, laburnum, boxwood, but were displaced when dense tropical hardwoods were introduced, like the African blackwood, which is what my bagpipe is made of. So now, in the modern day, we have a lot more technology and bags are made out of pretty much entirely synthetic material. The bag in this one is a rubberized cloth, which has a zipper now, which is very effective in getting rogue drone reeds that fall into the pipe. So as for the drones and chanters, as I said earlier, they're made out of the African blackwood, which is one of the densest woods on the planet. And it's also very expensive, which is how these things can cost upwards of $1,000 because it prevents cracking in the pipes and it lasts much longer than any of the older ones did. So now that you know more about the construction and the history, let's get into how they work today. So how the bag works, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it just holds air. That's its entire purpose. And it's able to do this because of the double reed that's in the chanter that works as a valve that lets air flow out of it but not back in. So under a lot of pressure. But the drone that you hear that plays the long drawn out sound is only a single reed, which is why they make that long sound and you're only allowed to make sound out of the chanter. So how the drones work is you have the bass drone and the two tenor drones. And according to a study done on drone reed material, there was really no significant difference found between synthetic and traditional cane reeds, but the synthetic reeds rely less on humidity and temperature, and they last a lot longer. So how the chanter works is it plays only in one octave in the key of D major, but this still allows you to play songs like Thunderstruck. So other woodwinds have the same kind of design, they're pretty similar, but these have something called grace notes where if you tap on the sound like that, it makes a little bit of a chirp, which you hear in pretty much every bagpipe song. So Once your bagpipe is finally assembled, it's time to tune it. So how to tune the drone is, according to Britannica, it actually says that the bass drone here is an octave lower than both of the tenor drones, and you tune them to the low A of the chanter, which is why it's important to have your chanter in tuned. So to tune the drones, you slide this top part of the pipe up or down, you slide it up to flatten it, down to sharpen it, and for the chanter, you use something called gaffer tape, which flattens out the note when you put it on, and gaffer tape is used in usually like theater productions and sets where you need really strong tape. So now that you know the inner workings of bagpipes, let's put it all together. So the Highland pipes that we know today is rich in history that make for a fascinating instrument with very complex yet simple design and a little bit of a finicky tuning system. So after hearing all this, who knows? Maybe now when you hear a bagpipe, you'll think of Samaria. Okay, so now I'd like to open it up to you guys if you have any questions about my speech. Yes?
So how hard is it to play the bagpipes if it's really humid?
If it's really humid, it actually doesn't affect how difficult it is to play them. It just affects how it sounds. So it could potentially be the same as you tuned it a day when it wasn't humid, except it will sound absolutely horrible. And you basically have to fix the entire thing. And you have to be very careful of the reed because it can get a little too wet and then sound worse. Yeah, go ahead.
Some of us follow rules, Dave.
Go ahead.
If you find that your bagpipes are out of tune while you're playing them, is there any way to tune them on the fly, or do you have to stop?
Well, you should ideally have them tuned before, but if that's not an option, what you can do is you can keep the bag really full and then squeeze on it harder, which will flatten out notes that are too high that might be really sharp. But other than that, you really can't do much while you're there. You can tune the drones, but the reed is a lost cause.
Gotcha.
I have questions about the reeds.
Okay.
So there's two kinds of reeds.
Yes.
Right, the synthetic and the
cane.
And the cane. Okay. So have you played with both? And if you have, which is your preference?
So with the chanter, I've only used a cane reed, but the drones have synthetic reeds in them. I think they've worked fine, and studies have said that the sound quality is exactly the same. There's basically no difference, but the cane reed works the best in the main chanter part. All right. Yes.
So where exactly does the sound come out of all of that stuff?
Mm-hmm. The only thing it doesn't come out of is the blowpipe, because that just is straight to the bag. But these three all have reeds in them, so it makes one sound for each of them. And then this makes noise because it also has a reed, but it just takes a lot more air pressure. All right. So if any of you have any extra questions, our time is up, but if you'd like to ask me more after my speech, I'd be more than willing to talk to you afterwards.